It's jam night. Come help us make some strawberry jam. All right, guys, we're gonna make strawberry jam. We're not gonna use a canner or anything. So, first thing, I go by the recipe on the Sure-Jell, just exactly the way it is. I've tried in the past halving it or not using as much sugar, and you can't do that because the sugar activates with the pectin, the amounts. So you can try that, but it's not going to congeal. Have you done that too, Summer? Yes. And you have juice, really sweet juice instead of jelly. So I've used 2 containers of frozen strawberries. So these are 16 ounces. This calls for 5.5 cups of crushed strawberries. So I have a little tool. You just mash them all up. So you can do it that way, or you can put them in a food processor, I guess a mixer. I heated them up a little bit. It's the best. You can also do it with hamburger meat. So we crushed them up. We started heating up the strawberries. And I added 1 package of Sure-Jell. You're supposed to get it up to a rolling boil. It's even boiling when you're stirring it, so that's a pretty hefty one. And then you cook it for 1 minute, which I have, and now I have the sugar in it. It calls for 7 cups of sugar, and they suggest that you measure it beforehand, and that's a good idea for me, especially because usually I start talking and I forget how much I put in there. So I just put it in here, and it was a lot. So I like to kind of continually stir it so it doesn't stick to the bottom. I just have it on the highest temperature, and when it starts boiling, then we'll turn the timer on. So in the other pots, if you're going to do this without a water bath, that's usually the way you seal jars. You've just got to make sure your jars are hot and clean. So you can boil them in a pot, or you can run them through the dishwasher. That's usually what I do. And then when I'm ready to fill them, I pull them out of the dishwasher. You also need your lids and rings to be hot. So that's what I've got back here going. And when this is ready, I'll start taking stuff out and putting everything together. Now, usually jams, also pickles, you do in a water bath. And what that means is you take your filled jar and you immerse it in water. And if it says you do a 10-minute bath, you start counting when it starts boiling. Some of these I didn't put through the dishwasher because honestly I didn't know how much this was all going to make till last night, and I realized I used up all my jars. So I have some other jars in there too. So it'll stay hot. I'll just keep it on hot, let it go, and then when I get them filled up, I'll stick them in there. If you don't have time to do a water bath, then you can take the hot jar, hot lids, tighten them, and invert them for 24 hours. Pickles do well like that too. But you want to make sure this is really tight, okay? Otherwise, it'll leak through. Not that that's happened before, and probably everybody. So you just leave it like that. Now the thing is, sometimes it congeals like this. There wasn't very much in here, and usually what I do with this is I'll just put it in the refrigerator, and we go ahead and sample it. Make sure it's good. Here we go. All right, so we're boiling now. As it boils, it's going to foam up. And so they recommend that you put a half a teaspoon of butter in it, and it helps to keep the foam down. And so you want to make sure you have enough jars, enough lids. I usually try to have more jars than I'm going to need because you just never know. I thought a batch of this would make a dozen, but it made almost 2 dozen. Now you can use fresh strawberries if you want. I didn't just for lack of time. In the summer, they're really good. You could just put them whole in here if you wanted, and just mash them up, just like I did these. I have a little bit of blackberry jelly. Those are all from fresh blackberries. But I have a juicer on my KitchenAid, and I just ran them through there, and I made a lot of blackberry jelly. I also made a couple jars of what's called simple syrup. I didn't know this, but people like to put that on pancakes. I've probably been stirring a minute, don't you think? Yeah. So jelly is the juice of the berry, the juice of the fruit, and not the pulp and seeds and whatever. These are whole strawberries, so it's everything. I mean, some people like to core their strawberries. All right, so I'm going to do this out here so you guys can see. Now this is a jar lifter. It's really very nice. Now at home, a 9 by 13 pan that is basically rust. And so I get that out and I put the jars in it because if you spill a lot of this, it gets really sticky. And if you don't clean it up immediately, it's going to take some muscles to get it off. Now you can also make jam using juice, like if you've got, sugar-free juice that you get from the store. I've made grape jelly that way. Of course, it doesn't have any seeds or anything in it. All right. I think this is probably okay to set it down. It's over here. All right, so I use this, these are kind of my tools, and I use a funnel just because it kind of helps to keep it kind of clean. I'm going to fill up these small ones first, and obviously they don't take a lot. You want to fill it, you want to have about a 1/2 inch at the top. And that can use a little bit more, I think. And if you do get jam all on the sides of the jars, you can just take a wet washcloth and wipe it off. It seems like once it gets really, really gooey, it's kind of hard to get it all off. Now they do make fruit pectin if you want to do less sugar in it. I don't know if you can put honey in it. Has anyone ever done that? Use that. You can either use honey or, whatever your substitute is, stevia. There's lots you can. We usually do green beans, and sometimes I'll can squash. I'll just cube it, and then when they're opened, I'll put them in the refrigerator. I usually put a label. I learned how to use my printer to make pretty labels, but usually I just wrote the date on there. Now, you can't do all kinds of canning things in a water bath. Some things have to be pressurized, and that's where you get to the real canner. Green beans, I think tomatoes, if I'm not mistaken. You have to be careful with tomatoes because of the acidity. One year, I just cut up a bunch of tomatoes and then put them in jars that way because we make a lot of soup in the winter. Tell this is hot. And then I could just, drain them and then put them in the soup. And the good thing is they taste just like they came from the garden. And it's really, really good. Now, after these lids seal, you can take the ring off. Usually if I give them away, I don't take the ring off. But you can purchase plastic rings if you want. And some things will have you put like a teaspoon of lemon juice in it for a preservative. Some have you put salt. Like the green beans call for salt. It's not hard, is it? You have to make sure you've got good lids. Now, you can't reuse lids. We had some friends that the first time they tried canning, they went to the farmer's market and bought like a huge bunch of green beans because they had 4 kids and they were really going to do this. And they didn't do something right. I don't know if they got lids that weren't good, but they started growing hair on the inside. So, like, oh, well, that was a waste. But so when you seal them with a pressure cooker, I think you can do it in an Instapot. I've never done it, but I'm sure that you can. So you have to get them in this pressure cooker, and you have to get the pressure up to a certain point. Like it'll say like 25 pounds, and you have to kind of watch the gauge and make sure that it stays at that. I do have a regular canner, but now they make an electric canner, and that's like the Cadillac of canners. And we stopped using our regular canner because you're not really supposed to use it on a glass top, and because it's really, really heavy. Right now, I'm just going to put all of these back into the water. So he went and he bought this electric canner, and okay, so these are all immersed, and it's boiling. All right. So this electric canner, it's fancy. It's expensive too, I'll just say. But so you turn it on, and it says, do you want a water bath or a pressure cooker? So you put it, let's say the water bath, and it'll say how many minutes. You dialed it to 10, and it'll say fill the jars. So you fill them with water, and like I had the jars already. I was about ready to start putting stuff in. No, it goes all the way to the very beginning. Have you seen them? Yeah, so it'll say fill your jar. So you fill it with water, you put them in there, you seal it, hit a button, and it heats them up for you, right? And then it'll beep, and it'll say fill your jars. And what that means is whatever you're canning, put it in and put the lids on it and put it back. And so then you put it back in and you hit start, and it gets it up to pressure. It keeps it up there, and then it has a cool down on it. So you can like leave it. You know, after you do that, you just leave it. It does all for you, and it's very quiet. You can't hear it. Like this, it's almost like a canner for dummies. You know, it's so very simple. But you know, you can see this is pretty simple too. All right. Well, you can can almost anything. I would recommend getting a book, and I forgot to bring my book. But you can get a book, and it'll have every kind of thing that you ever want to can in it, and it'll give you those specific recipes. You know, you can get them at Walmart, anywhere, and it works out great. Questions? Thank you. You guys are welcome to take some jam home.
Ginger is an expert, isn't she? An expert is someone who has comprehensive and authoritative knowledge of or skill in a particular area. And it's obvious that Ginger is an expert in cooking and canning and jamming and baking. So maybe you're more like me, a jamateur. Yeah, that's what you call an amateur jam canning person. Or maybe I made that up. In any case, an amateur is someone who lacks experience or skill in a particular activity. But now we've seen right in front of our very eyes that canning jam is actually not that difficult. And now that we've watched Ginger and learned how to can jam, we're experts too, right? Well, none of us actually starts out as an expert in anything, but we can learn and practice until we're experts. So what would make us more comfortable as budding experts? maybe a step-by-step process carefully written out and explained? I'm glad you thought of that, because that's exactly what God gives us for becoming expert Christians. His instructions, they're written out, they're explained and available for reference anytime. So let's define what an expert Christian is. Wait, no, let's start with what an expert Christian is not. An expert Christian is not someone who's memorized the books of the Bible and all the vital verses. It's not someone who's attended Bible college or seminary. And it doesn't have to be someone with certain spiritual gifts like teaching and evangelism and prophecy. And it doesn't have to be someone who's successfully left behind all their bad habits and behaviors. No, those descriptions fall short of what an expert Christian actually is. The definition is much simpler. An expert Christian is someone who's learning to align herself with God with all her heart, over and over. She's striving to know God better. She practices repenting because she knows she falls short. She's becoming more and more aware of her need for God. She's learning to appreciate His character, His master plan, His love, His comfort, His wisdom, all the attributes that make Him God and make Him worthy of our praise. What she's not is perfect. But wait, yes, she is perfect because of Jesus' sacrifice that removed all her sin finally, fully, and forever. You and I may not be expert jammers. In fact, we may not think we're much of an expert at anything. But from the moment that we choose to make Jesus the boss of our life, God's number one purpose is to make us more like Jesus. It says that in 2 Corinthians 3:18. And then in 2 Corinthians 5:17, the Bible says that we become new creations in Christ at the moment of salvation. From then on, we can look forward to God's gracious gift of an eternal future in heaven with Him. But while we continue life on earth as strangers waiting to go home, the struggles begin. Real life is full of decisions, large and small, which contribute to the person that we're becoming. You and I goof up, ignore God, and revert to former selfish behaviors. I'm fond of saying that God's working on us even when we're not paying attention, and thank goodness He does that. But when we practice alignment with God, His transformation work takes place in us more powerfully and more quickly, developing the character traits He most desires in us. C.S. Lewis calls this process becoming little Christs. And that is what an expert Christian is. Someone who's striving with all her heart to know God and align with Him. Every one of us can be an expert Christian starting today.